Daily Show host Jon Stewart is taking heat for his views on the economy that critics say show a lack of understanding of economics.
Last week, Stewart interviewed behavioral economist Richard Thaler on his podcast, and the two got into a debate over the effectiveness of carbon taxes. Thaler argued that most economists favored a carbon tax as a means of fighting climate change, but Stewart claimed that ideas such as those don't work in the real world. Let's watch that.
It's just setting the price so that you have the incentive to act in a way that's best for society.
But that's not economics. Economics doesn't take into account what's best for society.
Yes, yes, it does. Yes,
what? Wait a minute.
And Stewart continued, making his case for how economics fails to make people's lives better.
The goal of economics in a capitalist system is to make the most amount of money for your shareholders. So my point is, since when is economics about improving the human condition and not just making money for the companies that are extracting the fossil fuels from the earth?
Now, those comments did lead to some backlash from economists, including journalist Jerusalem Demsis, who wrote a lengthy article for her web magazine, The Argument. She writes, at this point, it became clear Stewart has conflated the entire field of economics with a half-remembered left-wing caricature of capitalism. Not everyone knows or needs to know what economists do, but if you've spent the bulk of your life arguing about economic policy, interviewing experts, and leading politicians and thinkers, I think it's pretty shocking to reveal you've never had any idea what you were talking about. Throughout the interview, Stewart seemed to believe that economics is just a sophisticated justification for letting rich people and corporations do whatever they want, and that this total lack of basic understanding renders him an inept translator of politics and an ineffective force for the very policies he says he supports.
In his most recent episode of the podcast, Stewart responded to the criticism, but didn't exactly back down from his arguments.
They're in the room when these policies are made. You know, they are incredibly influential in designing the parameters of our economy. And yet, if you criticize that, you know, it stirs up, they're, if I may say, very mean. They're very mean people.
That person he's arguing, by the way, at the interviewing, is Oren Cass, who has also been criticized for getting some very basic economic things wrong. He's not a well-liked figure by those of us who do appreciate economics as a science.
Well,
here's what... Okay, go ahead.
Because Robbie, you know what I mean? Like, you write, you're a journalist, you do a lot of things, right? Mm-hmm. Stewart is a comedian. He's a cultural critic. He doesn't have to be a technical economist. No, it's not. He doesn't have to be. Just like Joe Rogan doesn't have to be anything, right? People excuse all the nonsense. He's always saying stuff that's wrong, and I like Joe Rogan. But he has somebody in there, oh, check this out. Whoever the guy is that checks stuff out and sends him links, like, he is not supposed to be well-versed in every single topic in the weeds. He's talking real world talk. That's what most people who are watching Jon Stewart are thinking and not understanding. And he's having an expert who understands the economy breaking it down for him. So isn't that more helpful that he's showing his flaws and just being human as we all do on these podcasts?
Okay, he purports to influence people. I don't think anyone of that ilk can then just fall back. Oh, I'm just a comedian. Don't take me seriously.
Joe Rogan. So tell Joe Rogan that he's not allowed to do that because he seriously has gotten stuff wrong before.
And he doesn't say I'm just a podcast.
He says
he interviews also. Look, I don't know what we're arguing about. Jon Stewart, in what he was saying about economics as a science, was incorrect. This doesn't mean I hate him now or something. It was not his most impressive interview because what he was saying was not correct. He was saying that he was not understanding what economics, like the person he was interviewing, who's not some right-wing crank, the person was arguing for a carbon tax as the most economically efficient way to improve climate change, and that whole thing about this is just helping shareholders or whatever. Look, economics is the science of organizing the resources and the finances of society. It's not, you're right, it's not passing a moral judgment on that, and you can organize the resources of society in such a way that it benefits a small number of people and harms many others. But the insights from economists about how decentralized market-based approaches to problems tend to work better than top-down central management of the economy, that is an insight from economics that has translated into history, and we have run such experiments, and we have found out that free market economies outperform not just for the wealthiest people, but also raise the standard of living for people at large much better than a mercantilist economy from the Middle Ages or the late medieval period, or a centrally controlled communist or fascist or whatever, one where the government centrally manages all the resources. There's a reason that only a small number of idiosyncratic, deeply repressive countries like North Korea still operate under these outmoded economic models. So economics is not what Jon Stewart was saying.
Right. So some stuff could get lost in the point, but what I think I understood, and I just watched the interview right before the show, but he's saying that a carbon tax, or the economists are arguing that this carbon tax is optimal. And he's saying that if voters push politicians or punish politicians after they raise the taxes and raise energy prices because they're doing these things, policy that can't pass is not useful at all. So he's saying if this can't pass the voter test, it's not going to pass anyway. So economists can think what they want, but if energy prices rise, voters are not going to be on board with this. So it's just, he's looking at it from a voter's perspective, and how do you sell that to the mass public and say this is a good way forward?
Democracy is a failed system. The market is not.
Yeah, but you can't throw away the whole system. And he's also questioning some of the moral assumptions. He's saying, like, this is optimal for whom? He's asking who pays the cost. He's asking some of these questions. I think that those are real questions to ask somebody that's on your show.
It aligns the incentives in a way that will cause them to mitigate the harm to the environment, because they would have an incentive to do so. So economists are always that you can't just say, oh, we want it, we would like it to be this way, and we're just going to make it that way, without considering human behavior and incentives, right? The incentives that making money provide. We should use that incentive that human beings form firms that want to derive benefit to the shareholders, and put that in service of doing some human good, because that can be in service of doing ill. But that markets and property rights tend to mitigate harms. I'll give you another example, like the whole tragedy of the commons effect. If you just have a public space that no one has clear ownership over, it gets looted, it gets ransacked, it gets not well taken care of. If the space is owned by someone, then what we found from behavioral economics is that person generally has a better incentive to take care of it because it's theirs. This was somebody won the Nobel Prize in economics for this, since Eleanor Ostrom, I think is her name, that even in Africa, even in jungles, that giving property rights to certain tribes to hunt whatever the large game animal they're hunting resulted in those populations thriving more, because if they had an exclusive right to it, they didn't want to hunt them to extinction. Whereas when it was just a public resource, well, then it's like, well, I got to hunt it to extinction before somebody else does. Right. So those are insights from economics, from behavioral economics, that we can use to improve the world. That one would like Jon Stewart to be a little bit more educated on it. That's all.
And I accept your perspective, but I also don't think the think pieces are warranted. Jon Stewart's done a pretty good job throughout his tenure of his career, and so the fact that he got this one wrong, maybe people should just simmer down a bit. There's like full dissertations towards the man.
Fair enough.
I didn't want to respond again. Now, Pam Bondi is going on the offensive during a hearing on Capitol Hill yesterday. We're going to be right back and talk to you about that.